So we got a video here. Fox News. It's your boy Kicking It with Timmy B. Make sure you hit the like, share, and the subscribe button. Apparently, Fox News says judge delays sentencing in Trump New York City criminal trial until after the election. Let's go see what they have to say.
New York City courts, Judge Juan Marchand, who has been the presiding judge over former President Trump's so-called hush money case, has made a determination that he is not going to go ahead with the September 18th sentencing date for the former president, that it will be delayed until after the election. This had been a really fraught decision for this judge because people had observed, Sandra, that if he had have gone ahead with the sentencing, then the former president could have accused him of meddling in an election. And if he decided to delay the sentencing until after the election, no doubt he would get hit by a lot of accusations that he was acting in Donald Trump's political interests as opposed to in the interests of justice. But the breaking news coming to us just a couple of minutes ago, Judge Juan Marchand, the presiding judge in the so-called hush money case with Stormy Daniels, has decided to delay the sentencing for the former president until after the November election. This is a big decision, Sandra.
Yeah, because there's like a rule that you're not supposed to meddle, or are you like you're not supposed to be sentencing or putting anybody on trial before like 70 days before an election or something like that. And all of this started like popping up. All these cases are with the special counsel Jack Smith. This case comes back up, and it's like, bro, like, what are you guys doing? This is like 60 something days away from an election. Why are you guys doing all this stuff now? So now this guy with this whole Stormy Daniels thing is pushing the case to next month instead of it being on the 18th or something like that. It was supposed to be. It was, to my knowledge, which it helps, but it's like if he loses, then he's just gonna go to jail after, right? But if he wins, then he doesn't have to go to jail. Like, it's so weird how they're putting this ultimatum on him. It's crazy.
Obviously, the implications of the timing is huge, considering the upcoming election, November 26th, many days and weeks after Election Day. So this just in, and we're going to get brand new reactions shortly. Obviously, we're talking about the judge overseeing former President Donald Trump's hush money trial. This has obviously taken center stage to many other cases we've been watching this week. But the sentencing now, John, delayed to November 26th, as we learn brand new details.
The former president was speaking to this just a little while ago at his New York City Trump Tower headquarters, saying that this was a deal, that there was nothing that was wrong with it legally. Now, don't forget that the Manhattan district attorney decided to bootstrap that case, which would have been a misdemeanor, to the commission of, or possible commission of, a federal crime, election interference, or at least affecting the outcome of an election, and turned that into a felony. And in doing that, he got around the statute of limitations. And the jury came back with the verdict that the former president was guilty on all counts. But we're not going to learn about the penalty that will be imposed in this case, if a penalty is imposed at all, until sometime after the election. And if the former president wins the election, Sandra, that could potentially change the outcome of literally everything.
All right, if you're just tuning in now, we just got word that the judge in this hush money case has delayed former President Donald Trump's hush money sentencing until after the election. You can see the date on your screen there is November 26th. John, just looking at the court document here and making my way through it to see if there's any further details that would be pertinent. But obviously the news is that this will be happening after the election. John, there will obviously be political debate and conversation around this in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, there's no question. Again, as I said, the decision by the judge was fraught, and he probably was going to face criticism no matter what decision he made. Again, if he had decided to go ahead with the sentencing and even sentenced former President Trump to jail time, which a lot of people thought would be the outcome of this, then there would be a great hue and cry from the Trump campaign and his supporters that this was the judicial system interfering in politics, but that if he waited, he would probably get a lot of criticism from Democrats saying, well, wait a second, this was supposed to be examining the rule of law and carrying out the rule of law, not taking into consideration the political fortunes of a presidential candidate.
Joining us now by phone is Jonathan Turley. Jonathan, jump on in here on the breaking news as the former president, we know, as we learned weeks ago, moved to delay the sentencing for this hush money scheme until after Election Day, and it looks like the judge has decided to do so. Your reaction?
Yes, and forgive the bells in the background. I'm on campus. It's not signaling this opinion. The decision is not surprising in two respects. One is, it was always controversial to have the sentencing before the election, and the judge clearly did not feel comfortable that he was ready to do so. But the second reason is the reason for that discomfort. The Supreme Court decision presented some very serious questions about this trial, and the judge knew he would be subject to an appellate review. It's clear that parts of the trial did run afoul of the Supreme Court decision. He allowed testimony of people like Hope Hicks to be entered, and that clearly fell within the privileged aspect of the immunity decision. So he has to essentially get this cat to walk backwards. He has got to try to find a way that that evidence could be excluded, but the ultimate outcome be accepted. That's not as easy as people suggest, and he's got to create a record for that can withstand appellate review. So I think that the judge here is following the most cautious possible approach to say, let's hold off. It'll give me more time to look at the implications of this, and let's proceed after the election.
So in terms of proceeding after the election, it looks like the new sentencing date is set for November the 26th. But let's not forget, Professor, that just before then, on November the 12th, which is 7 days after the election, the judge is going to make a decision on a motion to vacate the conviction because of the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity. So do you think that date, that November 12th date, also played into Merchan's decision here?
I think it does. I think that all of this is being weighed together. I think that he believes that he can deal with the full range of issues here in terms of the sentencing issues, but also the continued viability of the conviction itself in November. I think all of those things, they're insular questions, but they're related to some extent. And the fact is that the judge said earlier, a sentencing if necessary, reflected the fact that he understands that there might not be any sentencing because there might not be any conviction. If he decides that the evidence in the trial corrupted the outcome. Now, many people are betting he will.
Yeah, I forgot who I was hearing that was talking about that. They like the folks that are like, to my understanding, bringing this whole case towards Donald Trump about the documents or something like that, or like they're bringing this up with like bad evidence or something like that, and it's so he had to he's resubmitting the case knowing that it was bad. It's like all this stuff is so complicated, man. It's always something. He's being tried for this. He's being tried for this. Being tried for this. Being tried for this. Being tried for this. All these 34 counts. It's like just so hard to keep up with, man. It's so hard to keep up with.
Will not reach that conclusion, but then he has to say why it did not corrupt the outcome, why it didn't taint the verdict. Hope Hicks and some of the evidence coming out of the White House at the trial must have had an impact on that jury. And she gave this very tearful testimony that received a lot of attention. And the prosecutors made reference to it in their closing argument. So you can't really separate these issues. I think that Merchan is giving himself a little bit of cushion of time. So he will make sure that when he issues all of these rulings, he's ready for an appellate review.
To that point, just reading through the letter, from the judge, signed by the judge, in reference to the defendant requesting an adjournment of his sentencing that was currently scheduled for September 18th, as we all know, until after the presidential election. The judge says he argues the adjournment is necessary to provide adequate time to assess and pursue appellate options in the event this court denies his pending criminal procedure law, and to avoid the potential politically prejudicial impact that a public sentencing could have on him and his prospects in the upcoming election. He goes on further and, by the way, signs this letter where he ultimately makes this decision, saying this is not a decision the court makes lightly, but is the decision which is in the court's view, best advances the interests of justice. Jonathan.
Yeah, it's a sort of an ironic passage because many of us questioned the rush to have these trials and proceedings before the election. And Merchan was largely sympathetic with arguments coming from the Trump team
Right,
that
to
he was
delay it.
gagging the leading candidate for the presidency and pulling him into a courtroom for a long trial when he was supposed to be out on the campaign trail. So it's a different tenor coming out in this letter than the one that that was previously heard in court. I think that he's making the right decision. You know, this is going to be a historic decision either way. But more importantly, he knows that every part of his decisions on these issues will be reviewed jot for jot by the appellate court and possibly the Supreme Court. And so he's going to take more time, try to get it right,
come up with a better,
and try not to have this clock running artificially set by the presidential campaign.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian.
Yo. All right. So that's Fox News. I'm going to leave that link in the description below. Let me know what you folks think about that. We got this article here by NBC News. It is, let's see if you can see it. Actually, let's do this. All right. We got this article here with NBC News talking about the delay that the judge is giving to Trump's sentencing and the hush money case until November. The former president was scheduled to be sentenced on September 18th. There's a couple weeks away. We just watched something to this, and then they go by Adam Reese and Laura Jarrett and Dara Gregorian. A New York judge has delayed former President Donald Trump's sentencing on felony criminal charges until November 26. This is not a decision, or quote, this is not a decision this court makes lightly, but it is the decision which, in this court's view, best advances the interests of justice. Judge Juan Merchan, that's how I pronounce it, wrote in the decision handed over Friday, or Merchan. Merchan issued the ruling after Trump's attorneys had asked him to postpone the September 18th sentencing until after the election to allow them to appeal a pending ruling involving presidential immunity. That ruling was expected by September 16th, just 2 days before that would have been the first ever sentencing of a former president on criminal charges. Trump was convicted on May in 34 counts of falsifying business records. That's what it is. That's 34 counts of falsifying business records related to a hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels near the end of the 2016 presidential campaign. A single business day is unreasonably short period of time. For such an appeal, Trump's attorney Todd Blanchett and Emil Bove argued in an August 14th filing, quote, there is no basis for continuing to rush, end quote. Prosecutors from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office said that they would defer to the court on whether an adjournment is warranted to allow for orderly appellate litigation of any Trump appeal that would be prepared to appear for sentencing on any future date the court sets. So prosecutors from Manhattan's District Attorney Alvin Bragg said that they would defer to the court on whether they would defer on the Supreme Court or to the Supreme Court or to the court. Because that interesting. Merchan said that in his order Friday that he took that as the DA essentially consenting to the request. He also acknowledged that the case is one of that stands alone in a unique place in this nation's history. The public's confidence in the integrity of our judicial system demands a sentencing hearing that is entirely focused on the verdict of the jury and the weighing of aggravating and mitigating factors, free from distraction or distortion. Interesting. It's like, get that court stuff out of here. We need to let these folks focus on the election here, because we don't want to hear anybody saying that we were doing any interfering. You know what I mean? Because we wouldn't want to be doing that, right? On one of if the most important presidential election of this United States lifetime. The members of this jury served diligently on this case, and their verdict must be respected and addressed in a manner that is not diluted by the enormity of the upcoming presidential election. Likewise, if one is necessary, the defendant has the right to a sentencing hearing that respects and protects its constitutional rights. The judge wrote, the order has pushed back the date for his ruling on the immunity issue until November 12th, a full 2 weeks before the possible sentencing date. And after the election, Merchan said the delay should help avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election in which the defendant is a candidate. Trump said in a post on social media after the decision was released that the case is a political attack against me and has been postponed because everyone realizes that there was no case. I did nothing wrong. He goes, quote, this case should be rightfully terminated as we prepare for the most important election in the history of our country, the Truth Social Post said. The ruling was published about an hour after Trump blasted Merchan as a very hostile judge in an address to reporters in Manhattan about the various legal cases he's facing, all of which he said are hoaxes. In a statement, Bragg's office said a jury of 12 New Yorkers swiftly and unanimously convicted Donald Trump of 34 felony counts. There's 34 felony counts. The Manhattan's DA office stands ready for sentencing on the new date set by the court. The delay is on the second time Trump's sentencing has been postponed in the wake of the United States Supreme Court's ruling expanding presidential immunity in an unrelated federal criminal case against Trump in Washington, D.C. The sentencing was originally scheduled for July 11th, but Merchan granted a request by Trump's lawyers for every time to try to convince him that the high court's July 1st immunity decision should result in the verdict being overturned and the indictment being dismissed. That's crazy. Yeah, that was on July 1st. We're like, oh, snap. These cases are being like dropped one by one, right? There's still a couple left here. The drastic moves are necessary, they argue, because the Supreme Court's ruling shows that Manhattan prosecutors should not have been allowed to present evidence of his official acts at trial, including former White House aide Hope Hicks' testimony describing a conversation she had with Trump while she was president, in the use of various public statements he made as a president. Ruling had no impact on the evidence they introduced at trial, which centered on Trump's personal conduct, and that the judge should leave the historic jury verdict in place. Trump's attorneys are launched at a second effort last month to move the state case into federal court, citing the Supreme Court ruling, another move that could delay the sentencing. United States District Judge Alvin Hillerstein rejected that request. Earlier this week, Hillerstein rebuffed Trump's attempt to move the case to federal court last year, finding that the evidence in that case overwhelmingly suggests that the matter was a purely personal, quote, one for Trump, a cover-up on an embarrassing event. Hush money paid to an adult film star is not related to a president's official acts. He said that the high court's ruling had not changed his view. Quote, nothing in the Supreme Court's opinion affects my previous conclusion that the hush money payments were private, unofficial acts outside the bounds of executive authority, Hillerstein wrote. In a decision Friday, shortly before Marcon's ruling, Hillerstein also denied Trump's bid to stay the case while he appeals the ruling. Trump was at one point facing the prospect of 4 criminal trials this year. The New York case in this one to have made it to trial. Shout out to these folks for this informative NBC News article. I'm going to leave the video that we watched on Fox News, and I'm going to leave the link for this NBC article about the judge delaying Trump's sentencing and hush money case until November. It's your boy Kicking It with Timmy B. We got a lot more intel to go into. I want to check in with a lot of these key points here and get really informed so we can understand what is to come, because I feel like this ain't over yet. It's your boy Kicking It with Timmy B. I'll see you on the next one.